The pro-Palestinian protests that engulfed college campuses have now found a new stage, the graduation stage. At Duke University Sunday, about 30 students walked out of the commencement ceremony as comedian Jerry Seinfeld was being introduced. Seinfeld has supported Israel throughout the war against Hamas in Gaza, and here is some of what he then said in his address.
I totally admire the ambitions of your generation to create a more just and inclusive society. I think it is also wonderful that you care so much about not hurting other people's feelings in the million and one ways we all do that every second of every day. It's lovely to want to fix those things.
That is far from the only protest to hit college commencement ceremonies over the weekend. CNN's Nick Valencia joins us now. What all happened, Nick?
Yeah, hey, Kate, good morning. Commencement season is upon us, and these pro-Palestinian demonstrators are choosing to voice their opposition to the war in Gaza in a variety of ways, some continuing to call for a ceasefire. And over the weekend, we saw that at commencement ceremonies across the country, really. Some chanted, others held signs, some draped themselves in Palestinian flags, calling for their schools to divest from Israel. But for the most part, these ceremonies went on without a hitch. In Southern California, though, there was a brief interruption. According to the New York Times, at least one person was arrested over a skirmish outside of Pomona College's graduation. They had to move their graduation 30 miles away from their campus. And at Duke University, we saw what happened there in the intro. Comedian Jerry Seinfeld, who's been a very vocal supporter of Israel since the Hamas terrorist attack on October 7th, he was protested by a few dozen pro-Palestinian demonstrators who chose to walk out and have their own commencement ceremony. Across the country in California, at UC Berkeley, the dean of students had to take the microphone. There was a pause in ceremony there, and listen to what the dean of students had to say to try to get control again of that graduation ceremony.
Students, if you're open to it, I invite you to speak with me after the event in a space that's more appropriate. But in the meanwhile, I ask that you allow the program to continue. Okay? Because otherwise we're going to have to continue to have you leave, and that breaks my heart. So.
The ceremony did continue. No one was arrested, and those demonstrators, we understand, did leave voluntarily. More commencement addresses and graduation ceremonies are planned across the country this week, and we're starting to see some schools try to get ahead of these potential demonstrations. We're just learning the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee has reached an agreement with pro-Palestinian demonstrators to dismantle their encampment by tomorrow. In exchange, they've agreed not to interrupt a graduation ceremony. In exchange, the university will join calls now for a ceasefire in Gaza. Kate?
Nick Valencia, thank you so much.
As college commencement ceremonies continue, so do the protests. On Sunday, comedian Jerry Seinfeld was interrupted at Duke University's graduation ceremony.
In addition to receiving an honorary degree, Jerry is also serving as our commencement speaker today.
Well, about 30 students walked out as the comedian was introduced. You can see some students waving the Palestinian flag. Here's how Seinfeld responded.
And I know all of you here are going to use all of your brains and muscle and soul to improve the world, and I know you're going to do a bang-up job. And when you're done, as I am now, I bet the world, because of you, will be a much better place. But it will still not make a whole hell of a lot of sense. And it is worth the sacrifice of an occasional discomfort to have some laughs.
Meanwhile, Pomona College in Southern California moved its ceremony more than 30 miles away to avoid the pro-Palestinian protests on campus. CNN's Camille Bernal has the story.
Many students and parents frustrated in this case because they have to drive 30 miles and change their plans just to make sure that commencement goes on as planned. So instead of it being in Pomona College, it's going to be here in LA at the Shrine Auditorium. You can see it here behind me. There are security measures already in place. There is a barrier, a metal barrier, and already security guards. You are not allowed inside the auditorium if you do not have a ticket. The school apologizing and saying not only that this was an inconvenience, but also saying that they would provide transportation for the students to get here to Los Angeles. Nonetheless, students just disappointed and say they're not happy about this whole change. Take a listen to what one student said.
I think it's sad, and I think it's a really bad way to end your college career, and I think it's showing exactly where Pomona is headed.
And some universities like Columbia and USC canceling altogether this big traditional commencement ceremony and instead making other plans, citing safety reasons and wanting to avoid protests. We saw students at Duke University walking out right as the commencement speaker was introduced. That was Jerry Seinfeld. He was able to give his address as planned with no apparent interruptions. And this weekend at different universities, we saw students at UC Berkeley chanting and protesting and briefly pausing the commencement ceremony. They then walked out of that event. And also at Virginia Commonwealth University, at least a dozen students also walking out when the governor was beginning to give his commencement address. So again, that's what a lot of universities are trying to avoid this weekend and others who have events later on. And of course, this has also caused just a lot of frustration among students who had to deal with graduating from high school in the middle of a pandemic and now again having to deal with commencement under difficult circumstances or under something that they do not consider a normal commencement ceremony. Camila Bernal, CNN, Los Angeles.